everybody, it's Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the conversation series between writers, and I am having a blast doing this. Hey, not to pat myself on the back, but I'm going to go out there and say writers are pretty interesting people, and everybody's story is different, and it's always fascinating to see what path works for somebody or doesn't work for somebody, and we'll get into that with today's guest in just a minute. But first, I want to mention that I still have openings for my writing retreat, The Gentle Novelist, this August 9th to 11th in beautiful Boulder, Colorado. It is going to be inspirational. It's going to be motivational. You're going to learn lots of tools and tips, but more than anything, you're going to get kind of the momentum you need to write that book that you've always been dreaming about. So whether you're a struggling writer or an aspiring writer, or you just want to be within that community of writers to give you that motivation to pursue your passion, this is exactly what the retreat is for. So just go to my website, carterwilson.com. You'll see a link there for retreats, and you can read all about it. And of course, there's a link to just email me. We'll set up a phone call. We'll have a conversation, see if it's right for you. So today on the show, I had author A.G. Riddle. Interesting guy. So, by way of introduction, his novels have sold over 4 million copies worldwide and have been translated in 24 languages. And several of his works are in development for feature films. So, he's only been writing for about 10 years. And he's had tremendous success, starting out as a self-published author, without really any background in writing at all. He you're going to hear in the interview, he had his own internet company, sold that, had some success and some financial freedom because of that, and just kind of sat down and said, well, what is it that I want to do with my life? And he always enjoyed reading the types of books that he ended up ultimately wrote, and just kind of pursued that, and spent 2.5 years writing that first novel, and it met with a lot of success. So, obviously a little bit different than the path of a lot of writers who struggle for years and years and years. But he's very humble, and he's got a lot of good advice about, the way that he approaches things. And I think he and I are both in total agreement that more than anything, it's about doing what makes you happy, writing what you find joy in, and not writing to find success. Because if you pursue your passion, if you pursue what interests you and what you're passionate about first, hopefully success will follow. But if you make success kind of the barometer of why you start something, that's setting yourself up for not only failure, but just unhappiness. So anyway, he had a lot of good advice. His internet had some issues, ironically, since he ran his own internet company, but he was up at an Airbnb, so kind of cut in and out. So I'm sure my producer will have edited this, so there might be a couple weird skips here and there in the conversation, but you're going to like this one. This is my conversation with A.G. Riddle.
I grew up around businesses, and I knew I either wanted to go into business with one of my family members or start my own business. So I sort of grew up with that mindset, and in college started a business with a childhood friend and did that was our internet company that we did for 10 years.
Okay. But you going to college, what were you choosing to study, knowing that maybe you were going to do something entrepreneurial, postgraduate?
Yeah, I was a business major at UNC, and writing, like I loved reading science fiction, but it was never something that I imagined was a career path or something that I could do. I didn't grow up knowing any writers or, anything like that.
But you were a big reader, or you were a reader?
I was, yeah. I went through phases as a kid where I would lose interest, but as an adult, once I started my company, like reading is what I enjoyed every night after work. It was how I relaxed, and science fiction especially. Like I've always loved big ideas and stories that sort of expanded, my own mind. And so that, after work, that's what I really enjoyed.
And that's, I'm going to be very, I'm going to be very broad in general here, but that's pretty rare that somebody within the last 20 years, particularly a man, and then again, this is being very broad, is just going to come home and read. My experience has been that's not usually the case, especially if you weren't necessarily a voracious reader as a child. So that's fantastic, because a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people, including myself, nighttime is like, I just want to chill in front of the TV and watch a good show.
Yeah.
So you then you started an internet company. What kind of time period are we talking about here?
So, that was the year 2000. Is my internet connection stable or?
Yeah, and you're coming over through fine.
Okay, yeah. So we started the company in 2000, and it was really about 2010 when we sold the last company, and I thought, I've got an opportunity to take a little time to figure out what I really want to do with my life. I mean, I was sort of moderately successful in the internet business, and I felt very fortunate to have had the success I had, but I didn't feel like I had found the thing that I was really meant to do in life. And, I thought, maybe writing could be that career, but it wasn't something that I had really seriously entertained before. Frankly, I really didn't think about it as a career until I saw other books that I'd read that were self-published, that were science fiction. And I thought, these are pretty good books. And like, as a reader, I couldn't find enough that I wanted to read either at the library or the bookstore, because there were only so many books. And so the ebook, the Kindle, and the advent of ebooks really opened my reading life and allowed me to access content that, it made me a habitual reader in a way that I hadn't really been. And it gave me the convenience. It's like you say, after work, you're tired. Like, I don't want to go wherever and pick up the book or, whatever, or order it and wait for it. But that's when I really, 2010 is when I started working on my personal. It took me 2.5 years
Sure.
to write it full time.
This time period in your life leading up to 2010, after you've sold your company, is it fair to say that you had some degree of financial security that allowed you to, have that conversation with yourself about what is it I want to do?
Exactly. Yeah. And without that, I certainly wouldn't have started writing. I was really looking for, there's no way. I was looking for a career that I felt I was maybe a little more qualified to do, or that I would find more success and happiness in. And unfortunately, I picked writing.
Right. Yeah. Success and happiness. Wow. Those are, but I actually, I'm not so cynical, right? Because like you, I got into writing without any background or aspirations, or even the suggestion that it's something I should do. I literally fell into it, but the truth is, there is happiness, right? Whatever your degree of success in writing is, if you're doing it because it's a passion of yours, there's inherent joy that just sits there all the time. Not always, right? Like some days it sucks to write, but you do it because you have a passion for it. And why would you do it otherwise? So there is something there for sure. So I'm a little fascinated by this, because, there's a big difference between being a reader and a writer, right? And
I found out.
I've talked to a lot of authors who, are driven either by spite or tenacity, or who have read a book like, Jesus, I can write better than this. And that's what started their path. What was that like for you as you, you said it took 2.5 years, which is not a crazy long period of time, especially for, larger sci-fi fantasy. What was that? What were those first paragraphs like? Was it just like hand-to-hand combat trying to get through it?
Yeah, well, I read a lot of my process was fairly methodical. I went about it like you might go back to college or, go back to school. Like I bought a lot of books on writing. And then I tried to analyze the books that I really loved and tried to figure out what do I really like about this book and why does it appeal to me? But I thought that the first stuff that I wrote, I thought was just terrible. I was like, I'm never going to be able to do this. Like, there's no way from this starting point I'm going to improve to something that I would be proud to have people, try to read. And I mean, that's one of the reasons I write under a pen name. AG stands for Anna and Jerry. Like when I first released the book, I didn't want it under my own name just in case it was a huge failure. After, I mean, obviously I got better, over the course of 2.5 years, but I think I was really dedicated to trying to give that first book a good shot at success because I knew myself. Like I knew if it didn't get some degree of traction, that I would be fairly discouraged and sort of move on. Like, I would become a carpenter or whatever, whatever the next thing in my mind was but I do want to echo something you said, which is that I do think the writers that I know that are the happiest do have a passion for the actual work, for writing. And it's the ones who are the most unhappy, it seems to me, are the ones that want what writing can do for them, whatever they get out of the career, but they don't actually like doing the writing. And it's just like, if you're in it for the wrong reasons, I think it can lead to some unhappiness. But I've still, after doing this for 10 years, I like the process of creating something every day that I'm proud of and working, just like you said, not every part is pure joy. And there are parts that, like editing, I bog down. It's the worst. I absolutely detest it. But I do it because it's part of the job. Everybody, if you're going to do a job, there are parts that you don't like that you have to do.
Right. And it's wholly your job, right? It's not your day job where you can half-ass it maybe and it'll be fine. It's like it's the one time you have to be 100% honest with yourself, which is really hard. And it's humbling when you look at a paragraph and you're like, that's fine. And no, it's not. And you've got to rewrite it. And it's hard to do. But I mean, I firmly believe that with writing, probably with anything else, is like, if it's something that you love and you do it, just focus on that. And then the good stuff will come, almost incidentally. Hopefully it'll come. But if you're focused on like, I can't wait to be a successful writer, you're in it for the wrong reason.
That's right.
But your story is interesting because it's, your level of success is a little bit, if not extremely uncommon for somebody who just kind of started writing. So you wrote that first book, and it sounds almost like you looked at it on a very left brain, almost reverse engineered kind of how to write a book kind of a thing, while still obviously finding your own elements and style. How did you know when that book was done, like done, and then what did you then do with it?
Well, so I knew it was done when I had been working it those final months, and I just kept changing it. It wasn't getting any better. I had enough. So, the first book I wrote was called The Atlantis Gene, and it is very much a book like a Dan Brown or Michael Crichton style. It's very heavy with history and science, and like I purposely chose, like, and those are the books that I really love to read, and there's not enough of them. I felt like, this is a book that I personally want to read. There's not enough of these books. I think there's market need for it. And I also felt like it was a book that I could write because, like, I'm a huge geek. Like, I love to research this stuff. I love to learn about it. Mm-hmm. And the process of learning about it and putting it into a book is something that I enjoyed, even if my writing wasn't very good. And I knew that my writing would not be in that first book as good as it was going to be, hopefully, over the course of my career, if I was going to build a career. And so, by the end of the drafting process, I thought, man, I got to get this in front of some readers and figure out if this really is any good.
So no one has seen it at this point besides you.
No one. 2.5 years. Like, my wife thought I was going crazy. Like, right. She was very worried, and she's just like, this is like some weird Stephen King horror. What this guy's going to be in the.
You were probably a little bit embarrassed by it. Like, that's how I felt. I felt a little ashamed to tell people I was writing, because it felt like, I don't know what I'm doing. I felt like a fraud.
Yeah, I mean, she maybe thought I was, who knows what she thought. And I wouldn't let her read any of it. I was terrified for her to read it. But, she read it. And I mean, I thought I'd done some good. I'd done the best work that I could produce at that point. I'm still proud of that, but it was the best book I could write at that point in my career. But she read it and she thought it was pretty good. And then my mom worked on it. And anyway, but yeah, that was my process.
And then, so you're not necessarily workshopping it to, unbiased readers or anything. So was your next step like, looking for an agent, or what did you do with it at that point?
Well, at that point, and you're right. Like my mom, it was like, the Holy Bible and then Jerry's book. And like, I'm just like, this is not an impartial jury. Like, I mean, these people have no perspective. And like, I knew nothing about publishing, but I knew a great deal about the internet industry and putting something on the internet and trying to sell it. And I also felt like, to your point, what I needed was strangers to look at it and actual readers to tell me if this is any good. Like, so the idea of querying an agent or going to a traditional publisher was completely foreign. I knew nothing about it. So I self-published the book on Amazon. My wife went on Facebook and said, hey, Jerry's got a new book. You've got to go. You just stop everything you're doing. Don't pick your kids up from daycare. Get this book immediately. It'll change your life. I think, she lost a lot of friends over that.
But it was successful. So that I want to probe into that a little bit too, because I have listeners who are interested also in that, the non-traditional publishing process. So, obviously tens of thousands of people do exactly what you did. Write a book, publish it on Amazon, easy to do. Most don't find any level of success. What was that journey like for you once you hit that publish button?
Well, I should qualify. It's a great question. And I think it's a question that a lot of authors would try to figure out specifically, what is the right path for me? And it's like, both paths have, pros and cons. They have nuances. And I'm someone that says that there is no one size fits all. There's only the right path for you. And it might be one path today. And then in 6 months, the landscape might change and then the path might be different. But I want to say that when I released The Atlantis Gene, this was March of 2013. So the landscape was very different then than it is today. And specifically, there were a lot less books in the market. Ebooks were, gaining a lot of traction. And, for a book like The Atlantis Gene, a techno thriller, a science fiction thriller, it's 500 pages. Yeah, I think it was priced $2.99 or $3.99 or at points 99 cents. There was a lot of value for money, and I think that it had a lot of organic appeal just right out of the gate. And I think that's far harder to do today, to get eyeballs onto your book, because there are so many books, and it's not just books. I mean, it's streaming, it's TikTok, it's Instagram. There's so many things competing for the time of readers. And it was the type of book that e-reader, people would, reading ebooks really liked. It wasn't a literary book by any stretch, still not. And I think it was the right book at the right time in a market that wanted the book. And that's why I think that it succeeded.
And then what was your path? So you start seeing success with your first book that was self-published, and still not know anything about the publishing world itself, because you're just in almost this microcosm. Are you thinking to yourself at this point, like, this is a path I want to pursue, this writing thing, and let me do another book and I'll just go down the same route with the next few books?
More or less. Like, I think the mindset that I had was a little different than most writers. Like, my mindset was more like someone starting an internet company or a startup, in a sense of my biggest priority was to learn and to get feedback and to figure out how can I get better and how can I to figure out, what are my limitations, what are my strengths and what am I really good at? And so I was just really reading a lot of reviews, and I was trying to find an editor, a professional editor, to improve The Atlantis Gene and to sort of go through it. And I'd written I'd overplanned that book, and I'd planned a trilogy, and I had a start on the second book, which is called The Atlantis Plague. And so what I did that summer is I essentially rewrote the Atlantis gene with the help of an editor. I was writing the Atlantis Plague, and then I was trying to, keep up with fans and read reviews, which, I think can be a double-edged sword, but I was trying to learn and get better. And that's what, I think that perspective helped me a great deal. And I released the second book, I think in November or December of that year. So it came fairly quickly on the heels of it. And at that point, I got an agent in Taipei. Well, I signed with ICM, and they really wanted me to go down the traditional publishing route at that point. I didn't feel it was right because I felt like what I really needed to do is learn and get better. And I wasn't sure the traditional publishing route was I didn't want to take my books off the market. I didn't want to sell them. But I did start to sell foreign rights. I got an agent in Taipei, Gray Tan, who sold the books in Asia, and then Danny Bear in New York, who sold rights in Europe, and they remain my agent. I mean, we're going on 10 years now. So that was kind of my process.
Interesting. So what's also fascinating is you rewrote a book that was already out. So then did you just replace that copy, basically?
Yeah. I mean, I uploaded a new ebook, and then I uploaded a new PDF for the interior of the, we were just doing print on demand at that point.
Yeah. So, and then you complete the trilogy at that point?
Yeah. And then the third book in the trilogy came out May of the following year in 2014.
Okay. And you're still publishing under your name on Amazon. And are you seeing similar level of numbers with books 2 and 3 as number 1, greater, fewer?
Yeah, things kept ramping. I mean, the second book, The Atlantis Plague, I want to say that in the first month it released, it sold like 100,000 copies. I mean, between digital and POD, and it was just amazing.
How are people finding the book? Like, I'm just, again, maybe there's not as many books at that time, but still, how are you getting the word out that, I guess from the first book as well?
Well, things were radically different in 2014. I mean, it really was the Amazon algorithm, and then just being present in the bestseller chart was such a powerful thing. And I didn't have any book clubs. I didn't have any. I did nothing except.
You're infuriating so many people right now.
I know. I wish I had a better answer, but that was then. This is now. Things are obviously very, very different. But I mean, Time Machine is the answer.
Yeah, right. Which is easy for everybody to do.
It's very frustrating.
But now, as the landscape has changed, clearly, you've built the name, which is kind of the biggest hurdle for any author to have some kind of like name recognition. But how has the changing times manifested themselves with how you approach your writing and you're getting your book to audiences?
Well, two significant ways. I mean, so one of my first foreign publishers was a publisher called Head of Zeus in London in the UK, and they actually came up with the covers that we now use for the Atlantis trilogy, and they're a very capable publisher and just great folks. And so they've been publishing my books in the UK and Commonwealth and Australia and the UK, since I started writing. And so one of the things that I did starting in, I guess, 2022 is I start, Head of Zeus, which is part of Bloomsbury now, is publishing all of my formats, so ebook, print. We still sell audio. I've always sold to a traditional publisher, recorded books right now. But so I've started, instead of self-publishing, letting my traditional publishers publish the book, and I've tried to focus on writing. The other big change that I've observed is the sort of how big ads are, like paid ads on Amazon. And it's just such a big part of our business. And, in I guess it was 2017, along those around then that what was called AMS, which is Amazon Marketing Services, which is now sponsored ads, came onto the scene, and every year it seems like it's become a bigger focus. So I do spend time. I still have 9 self-published books, and we use Amazon ads to promote them. We don't do Facebook ads or anything else, but that's a big part of our business. I do think I'd love to try to add some helpful advice to authors out there. I mean, I think if you're trying to get eyeballs on your book, whether you're traditionally published or self-published, I mean, paid ads, I don't personally, I have my reservations about them, and I think there's some cons to them, but they allow you to put your book in front of the people you want, when you want, and to sort of control your own destiny to some extent. And I mean, it's not a panacea, but it's something we now use extensively.
And we'll wrap up pretty soon, but just along the PR lines, I'm just curious because I was just saying I have, the publisher's PR, and then I hire my own PR team for every book. But you're a very business-minded, analytical person, and who probably, like me, wants to try to measure an ROI with everything you do, and it's impossible. How are you gauging your PR efforts to know, like, is this a good idea or not?
It's a good question, and I don't know that we are employing any effort to gauge it, and we probably should be, and the publisher may be, but I sort of let them lead on that, and I try to be responsive and do everything they ask me to do. But it's not an area that I know a lot about, nor do I think it's something that I'm particularly good at.
Right, and that's a huge lesson, right? As a writer and a published author, is understanding that, in the case of traditional publishing, or pretty much in all publishing, you're one part of a team. And
exactly.
There are people who have a lot greater skills in what they do to get the book to market, like cover design and changing or, creating the title that maybe resonates better than the title that you came up with. And losing the ego and being able to say, like, yeah, you run with that because that is your strength, not is it mine, is a big lesson, I think.
I think it's a great point. And it's something that I think, especially as an author coming from self-publishing and having total control, it makes it a lot easier when people come with ideas that are obviously great, because you're just like, well, you know what? It's like, I'm invested in the book. And everyone is invested in their own ideas. But when you see something, you're like, they're right. Like, that's a much better concept for the cover. We've changed titles, we've changed, taglines. Yeah, they look at the description and a fresh set of eyes, and someone that's been writing descriptions for 20 years, and you've been writing the description for that book for a week, but you've been writing it for a year. I do think that the team aspect, there's a lot to it, and I think it's one of the reasons that teams can produce better books than we can alone.
I find personally, that authors who have worked in corporate environments and have that sense of like working as a team tend to be easier to deal with than those who are like, no, my way is the only way. Because the truth is, you might have conflicts, but everybody's singular focus is to sell more copies, right? They're not trying to make your book worse.
Right, exactly.
So I'm going through like my copy edits on something now, and there's like 400 comments, and it's all mostly just word choice, and it's a lot to go through. But I don't agree with a lot of or some of them, but I'm just like, yeah, some of these are fantastic, and you're just doing your job to make this book as good as it can possibly be. So you've been at this 10 years, you've had tremendous success. Things have changed in terms of how you approached publishing. Do you feel like with this latest release, are you kind of in a trajectory of like, okay, I'm going to be doing it this way for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I suppose I've personally, there's been a lot of changes in my life. My wife and I have 2 kids now, and I still love writing the kind of books that I originally published under H.G. Riddle, but I have other interests too, and I may, start a pen name to do some passion projects. But I think that I don't try to get locked into any particular mindset. I mean, I'm very happy with what I'm doing and the team, especially the team ahead of Zeus. I love working with. I think they do incredible work. And it seems to be working. I mean, they seem to be pretty happy. I'm well satisfied, and so I guess we're gonna keep going along this road at least for a while, and we'll see what happens. But I don't know. Publishing obviously is a changing landscape, and I guess my experience in the internet world was that everything changes, and change is the only constant. So
Absolutely. Everything's transient, and I think that underscores the reason to, regardless of where you're at in your writing journey, to kind of reflect on everything with gratitude, right? And be like,
yeah,
my book is out there. Like, I'm so grateful for that. And I'm doing something that brings me joy, and, what's not to be thankful for, even though, most journeys for writers are very cyclical and lots of ups and downs, and they might have a bestseller, the next book tanks, but to always have that ever present kind of gratitude, I think is grounding and necessary for me.
I couldn't agree more. I do think that it might be the only thing that keeps you sane in this business, because there are a lot of setbacks and ups and downs. I think if you judge everything, it's just going to make you miserable, because it's just like, all you end up doing is chasing that best thing that ever happened. It's just,
Right.
Nothing is ever enough.
Or even worse, chasing other people's success, which is poisonous.
It's toxic. It's a road to nowhere. I mean, it really is.
It's hard to avoid, but it's if you can be grateful for other people too, then it really opens up peace to you.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I'm gonna let you go. But before we do, we're gonna do real quick storytelling. And we're gonna choose a book on the bookshelf behind me, and then we're gonna choose a random page and a random sentence. I'm gonna read that sentence, and then that would be the first sentence in maybe a 2-minute long short story. I'll read it. You give me a couple next sentences. I'll do a couple sentences. We'll see what a shit show it becomes. But so I gotta choose something. So give me how many words in the title should there be?
How about 5?
Okay, I'll go look for a 5-word title. That took a while.
I realized like a 1-word title or 2-word would have been far easier. So I just running the clock down.
I really had trouble finding one, but I have The Story of My Assassins, Tarun Tejpal. I'm sure I butchered that name. So give me it's going to be an interesting one. Give me a page between 1 and 500.
47.
Then I want to scan page 47 and see if I find something that might work. All right. So do with this what you want. Later, naked in front of him, flat on her back, she would begin to slit her wrists again.
Wow. Okay. What he didn't realize is that someone was watching them. Someone who had been watching them for a long time.
He looked down at her and said, "We're not as alone as you think we are, but if you want to continue with what you're doing, I'm not going to stop you."
You would stop me if you loved me. Is that what you're really telling me? Question mark.
There was no immediate answer to this. Instead, he walked over to the bar, poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey, and took his time doing it. Threw a couple pieces of ice in there and sipped it slowly, all the while her gaze was locked deep into his. There was anguish there, anguish and love. He didn't know which emotion he wanted to play with first.
It was only after the whiskey had gone down and he'd settled into a chair that he realized that he was in a deeper plot than he imagined. His body began to get numb, his vision blurred. She had poisoned the whiskey because she knew he would go for it after she threatened to slit her wrist. I just killed one of the characters, so you can't really work with that.
I don't think he's dead yet.
Okay, great. Yeah.
In the stupor and the fog and the slow descent of darkness in his brain, he cursed himself for being so stupid, so naive. Of course she would do this. And of course she wouldn't do anything to stop it. But he still knew there was somebody watching them. Somebody was there just outside the room. And he didn't know if it was a malevolent presence or just a curious one. But if he opened the door, maybe they could help.
Crawling on his hands and knees, he unlocked the door and found his partner standing outside. He had promised not to follow him, but thank God he did, because he might be his only chance of surviving.
He grabbed his partner's coat, feeling the entire weight of his slowly dying body pulling him down, and begged him for help. And only as he started to slide down his torso, down to the knees, and down to his feet, did he look up and see the knife in his partner's hand.
Luckily, the knife moved past his face to the woman who was rushing with the blade toward him. His partner sunk the knife in the woman's chest, and she collapsed, bleeding, finally getting what she deserved.
All right, I think we call it there. I think we've had enough mayhem.
Well, that was really dark. I mean, I was thinking...
Well, that opening sentence didn't leave a lot to, a lot of room to make it into a little rom-com.
It was like a horror. Yeah.
I don't know if I've actually read that book. I've got to go read that now. Well, listen, Jay, what a fantastic time talking to you, and don't worry about the editing. We'll get that all cleaned up. And
Thank you.
It's so interesting hearing your path, because it is pretty markedly different than a lot of successful writers. And I think it just underscores that, there, like you said, there is no one way. There's the way that works for you, and you should honor that way rather than trying to chase a way that's not organic.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, and thanks for having me. And I really enjoyed it. And sorry about the internet.
Yeah, no, you're all good. Have a great weekend. Congrats to your sister, and enjoy the wedding.
Yeah, thank you. All right, take care.
Take care. So that's it. That is my conversation with A.G. Riddle. Fascinating talk that we had. I thought he had a lot of good advice, and it was so interesting to hear his story and his publication journey. And then, of course, kind of an unbeatable making it up at the end there with a very bizarro opening sentence from the book, The Story of My Assassins. So please go find out all about him, which you can do at his website, which is agriddle.com. And then while you're on the internet, just pop on over to my website, carterwilson.com. You can check out my books. You can look at my blog posts. You can look at my photography. You can sign up for my newsletter. And also you can sign up for my retreat, The Gentle Novelist, this August 9th through 11th in Boulder, Colorado. A wonderful writing retreat. I'm so excited for this thing to happen. It's going to be a lot of fun. So if you're looking for that kind of community, check it out. That's it for now. That is the end of this episode of Making It Up. More episodes will be out soon. In the meantime, as always, thank you so much for watching and or listening. Take care.